The twin suns of Virilax hung like molten eyes above the grand court of crowns, streaming gold across spires that clawed at the sky like frozen lightning. Marble stairs wide enough for military parades led into the Great Hall, where banners from 1,000 allied worlds floated without wind. The scent of incense, something sweet and metallic, hovered in the air, meant to soothe the senses and disguise the smell of tension. A hush had fallen over the crowd, the kind of silence that forms only when something truly impossible is happening. Darren Holt stood exactly 3 paces behind the Queen of Ilvara, trying very hard not to hyperventilate. He had only come to deliver a resupply manifest. That was all. One sheet, 17 items, mostly replacement fuses and nutritional cubes. Somehow he had been ushered past security, given a silver robe that made him look like an interstellar fondue fork, and told not to speak unless spoken to. He had, in fact, already broken that rule. Twice. The first time by asking a soldier if he could use the bathroom. The second by whispering, "What the hell is going on?" when a 6-armed harpist began playing a tune Darren suspected was written to summon gods older than morality. And now she was standing. The Queen Vel, the one he had seen only once before on a holoscreen, delivering a speech about unifying the spiral arms through diplomacy and occasional orbital intimidation, stood with the grace of a creature who had never stumbled on a rug in her life. Her skin was like pearl under stormlight, and her long ears were shaped like blades of moonlight. She wore armor that looked ceremonial until you noticed the microplasma inlays, pulsing faintly near her shoulders. Her voice, when it came, did not echo. The hall echoed her. "I have made my choice," she said. Every being in the chamber froze. Darren felt the moment like a vertigo drop in a dream, too sudden to be real, too specific to ignore. "I, Velthire of Ilvara," she continued, turning toward the gathered nobles, "Queen of the sovereign realms, keeper of the flame crown, first star of the hegemonic accord." "She has a lot of titles," Darren whispered to no one in particular. "Nirana, declare my intent to take a mate." This caused a ripple in the crowd. Whispers began in dozens of dialects, some of which Darren couldn't parse even with his translator implant. It sounded like a debate between jazz instruments. "And I choose," Vel said, pausing. Her hand lifted, her finger extended. "On this man." Darren followed her finger. It was pointing directly at him. He looked over his shoulder. There was no one behind him. He looked down. Still just his boots. He checked for invisible royalty. Nothing. "Me?" he said, voice breaking into soprano territory. I'm just the tech guy, like for spares and diagnostics." The court remained silent. He tried again. "I have no noble blood, no military record, and the last thing I ruled was a game of space trivia, which I lost." Still silence. Vel turned her gaze on him, measured, amused, something almost fond hiding behind the gleam in her alien eyes. "I know." Darren blinked. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His internal monologue was now just screaming. Somewhere in the back of the court someone fainted. A member of the High Consular Guild, possibly. A robot scurried over to revive them, tripping over its own legs and launching a tray of refreshments into the lap of the Varnathi ambassador, who began to hiss like an offended snake dolphin. Vel descended the dais, every movement deliberate. Her armored boots clicked like punctuation marks against the polished stone. When she stopped before Darren, he realized she was even taller up close. He tried to straighten his posture, which mostly resulted in him looking like a malfunctioning antenna. "You do not wish to be chosen?" she asked, one brow arching high and sharp. "I mean," Darren said, "usually the things that choose me are vending machines, and they mostly reject my card." She smiled. It wasn't the smile of a queen asserting dominance or a leader placating a court. It was something else. Amusement, genuine amusement. "You repaired a vital food synthesizer on an asteroid base under attack," she said. "I mean, yeah, but I used a spoon and duct tape. It wasn't exactly heroic." "You held your ground when the base's governor abandoned his post." Mostly because I couldn't find the emergency escape pods." "You stayed until the civilians were safe. There was only one shuttle left, and I figured they needed it more than I did. Also, I'm pretty sure I voided my insurance coverage by trying to climb out the airlock." The queen nodded as if he had confirmed a thesis she'd been writing in her head. Then my choice is made. The court exploded into noise. Arguments in 12 languages rose like a chorus of chaos. Somewhere in the din, a Kryvax noble challenged someone to a duel. Someone else began live streaming. Darren just stood there utterly frozen, caught between, "This must be a prank," and, "Do I have to bow now?" Vel raised one hand, and silence returned. "From this day forward," she said, "this man shall be recognized as my chosen mate. Accord willing, he shall stand beside me in future matters of rule." Darren held up a finger. "Just to clarify," he said, "does that include planetary invasions, or is that more of a ceremonial?" She turned back to him. "You may continue being yourself," she said. "That's probably the most terrifying permission I've ever been given." He glanced around. Dozens of powerful people were staring daggers at him, some literal, some metaphorical. At least two had their hands near plasma blades. A Vorn diplomat was weeping quietly into his translator fish. "Do I get a raise?" Darren muttered. Vel leaned in slightly. "What you get," she said softly, "is time. To understand. To ask questions. To refuse if you must." Darren swallowed. "Do people usually refuse you?" "Not twice." Her tone was dry, almost playful. The tension in Darren's chest loosened by a hair. "Okay," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Okay, this is fine. I can deal with this. Just another day. Just got promoted to, interstellar consort or something. Totally normal." Then under his breath, "Why couldn't it have been an accounting job?" Vel's smile widened, and though the court stood in a storm of scandal and disbelief, she simply took Darren by the elbow, gently, and led him away from the podium, past stunned generals and gasping aristocrats, through the vast silver doors of the royal chamber. "I have questions," he said. "I expect nothing less," she replied, and the doors closed behind them. The royal chambers of the Ilvaran palace were less a suite and more a miniature ecosystem. Trees with bioluminescent petals arched from open walls, shedding light like stardust. The floor hummed beneath Darren's boots, attuned to his heartbeat, or possibly just trying to scan for parasites. He had no idea. At least the furniture looked vaguely sittable. Vel gestured to a divan made from the woven hair of cloud beasts or something equally absurd. Darren sat carefully, half expecting it to react. It didn't. Small victories. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked, gliding to a curved console. "Sure, do you have water?" She glanced at him. "From which planet?" "Earth?" "Tap if you got it. Or, bottle's fine too." She pressed a button. A spherical drone descended from the ceiling, rotated to face Darren, and projected a holographic menu featuring 600 varieties of water. One included glowing particles, and the advisory may induce minor prophecy. "Option 6 looks fun," Darren said, "but I think I'll stick with Earth Tap." The drone chirped, zipped away, and returned with a floating glass orb of cloudy water. Darren took it, tried sipping, then discovered it didn't pour. He accidentally poked it. It popped and soaked his front. Vel made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "I'm very regal," Darren muttered, blotting his shirt with the sleeve of his robe. "Shall I fall down some stairs next?" "You're adapting faster than expected." "Oh, sure. I've almost got the hang of water." She settled into a seat across from him, armor folding away into a silkier garment as she moved. Technology layered into fabric, Darren guessed. She leaned forward slightly, her long ears twitching once, as if catching a frequency he couldn't hear. "I meant what I said," she told him. "You may refuse." "Right. Sure." Darren scratched the back of his neck. "And if I did, what happens? Do I get reassigned? Mind wiped? Shot out an airlock?" "I would be disappointed. But no, you would return to your duties. Unharmed, mostly." "Mostly?" "Palace protocol requires that you eat one ceremonial pepper of courage before departure." "Is that a metaphor?" It's quite literal." There was a pause. Darren nodded slowly. "Then I guess I'll think about it." Vel tilted her head. "You're not afraid of me." "Statistically, I should be," he replied. "But I've had worse bosses. At least you haven't screamed at me over a misfiled coolant requisition." "Not yet." Darren almost smiled. "So, what's the catch?" Vel blinked. "Catch?" You're, well, you. You could have any noble, war hero, or alien demigod with extra limbs and a jawline sharp enough to deflect lasers. And you pick a guy who once glued his hand to a docking hatch. You intrigue me. I'm basically an accident in slow motion. That may be exactly what this galaxy needs. Before he could argue with that, the door whooshed open and a being floated in. An advisor, judging by the nervous twitches and clipboard analog strapped to one limb. It resembled a jellyfish wearing spectacles. "Apologies, Your Radiance," it pulsed, voice translated through a hovering orb. "A situation." Vel sighed. "Let me guess. Assassination attempt." "It would appear so." Darren raised his hand. "I didn't do it." "No one thinks you did," Vel said. "Okay, but it's good to have that on the record." The advisor rotated in midair. A delivery drone was intercepted en route to the throne's morning chamber. It contained 3 sachets of high-density neuroacid. Also a note. Vel's voice went ice flat. "Read it." The advisor cleared its throat, or maybe simulated one. "Long live the throne, but not the throne sitter. Long live tradition, not contamination." Darren winced. "Wow. Someone's been using a thesaurus for evil." Vel stood, expression unreadable. "Who intercepted the drone?" "A human, civilian tech, assigned to maintenance." Darren blinked. "Wait, what? Me?" "Not you," Vel said. The advisor floated closer. "Ensign Cal Davies, your co-worker, the one with the nose ring and alarming caffeine intake." "Cal stopped the drone?" "With a chair," said the advisor. "He broke 3 fingers. He is recovering in the infirmary. We've offered him an honorary knighthood. He requested a lifetime coffee stipend instead." Darren exhaled. "That tracks." Vel was silent for a long moment. Then she turned back to him. "You and your kind," she said, "persist despite irrelevance. You survive not through power or strategy, but sheer will, and sometimes chairs. That sounds about right. You're underestimated. That makes you dangerous. I'm dangerous in the way salad is dangerous if you forget your fork. You're more than you know, Darren Holt. That is a very generous interpretation of my resume." The advisor made a polite hum. "Shall I inform the court you will be attending tonight's convocation of unity together?" Vel's eyes never left Darren. "Yes." Darren opened his mouth, closed it, thought about protocol, thought about ceremonial peppers. "Do I have to wear the robe again?" "Only if you want to be mistaken for a dessert." "I really don't." "Then no." He nodded. "Okay, I'll come. But I'm bringing my own water." Vel smiled again. This time it wasn't sharp or mysterious. Just warm. And for a moment, despite the threat of neuroacid, assassins, and a galaxy full of skeptical aliens, Darren felt less like a man out of place and more like someone exactly where he was supposed to be. The Convocation of Unity was held in the Sky Vault Hall, a structure so high above the palace it technically orbited it. Suspended on invisible gravlocks, the dome rotated slowly to give all attendees a shifting panoramic view of the Elvaran capital, the twin suns glinting off towers and skyships like sequins on a planetary ballgown. Darren's first thought when stepping inside was that someone had turned a planetarium into a diplomatic rave. His second thought was, "I'm going to fall off something and die in front of the entire interstellar aristocracy." The floor was transparent, not faux transparent, actually see-through, like standing on nothing. Below, thousands of meters of airspace shimmered. Then far below that, streets and towers and the occasional drifting transport. Darren wobbled immediately. "Gravity mesh will catch you if you fall," said Vel, not looking back as she walked across the invisible platform with the confidence of someone who routinely defied physics. "I'm not worried about falling," Darren replied, one foot hesitating in midair. "I'm worried about flailing in a dignified way." She stopped, turned, and offered her hand. "Then flail with purpose. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." With exaggerated caution and very real muttering, he stepped forward. The mesh held. The illusion of falling through the sky did not improve. A 3-eyed delegate from the Aldrex Commonwealth floated past, nodding politely, wearing a cloak made of something that looked suspiciously like condensed fog. Darren tried not to stare, or scream. The central dais was shaped like a blooming star, with petal-like platforms extending toward each faction's delegation. Vel and Darren took their position at the Ilvaran point, where a regal-looking chair of living crystal stood beside a far less impressive stool labeled Consort Temp. Darren eyed it. That seems temporary. It's a test, Vel said. Of what? Your sense of humor. Oh, good. I'd be worried if this were political. As they sat, an orb the size of a melon descended from the ceiling, projecting a six-sided hologram in the air above. Delegates from over 30 allied species blinked into view, many in person, some by holofeed. The room buzzed with static energy and polite hostility. The presiding moderator, a gelatinous creature wearing ceremonial spectacles, drifted to the center and rang a gong by extending a limb that resembled a rolled-up yoga mat. Order, order, it burbled. We convene the 87th Convocation of Unity. Let our oaths be renewed and our agendas debated. Please do not throw food this time. A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the assembly. One delegate from the sector of Vorn sheepishly lowered a hand that had been creeping toward a suspiciously weaponized fruit bowl. Let us begin with ceremonial reports, the moderator intoned. First, the Queen of Ilvara, who has announced a consort. Heads turned, eyes narrowed, feathers ruffled. Darren attempted to smile. Vel stood, regal and calm. Yes, I have chosen. Have you also lost your mind? Hissed someone from the Krivax table. Darren raised a finger. Hi, just want to clarify I'm not contagious, or political, or especially threatening unless cornered with a wrench. You insult tradition, said another. I insult bad plumbing more often, to be fair, Darren replied. Vel remained composed. The galaxy changes. We evolve or we perish. You may see a technician. I see someone who chose the lives of strangers over his own, without fanfare or reward. A few murmurs softened. One delegate leaned in to whisper to another. Darren imagined it was something like, he doesn't even have medals, or is that robe from a discount moon bazaar? Vel continued, he does not lead fleets. He does not seek power. And precisely because of that, I trust him. Darren swallowed hard. Wow, no pressure or anything. The holographic image above them flickered, briefly, then snapped back into clarity. A glitch, or a probe scan. Darren looked up. Vel's eyes narrowed. Someone, somewhere, was watching too closely. They continued with the ceremony. Reports from outer sectors, disputes over mining rights near the Gesh Nebula, a heated debate about the ethics of weaponized opera drones. Darren tried to follow. He really did. But the chair had no back, and the language of politics was mostly just passive-aggressive poetry. Halfway through, he leaned toward Vel. Hey, can I ask something? You already are. Are those fog cloaks actually functional, or just for drama? The diplomatic shuttle windglass glided through the void like it didn't want to be noticed. Everything about it was built for discretion. Matte gray panels, a drive core that purred rather than roared, and a Terran flag so faded it looked ashamed of itself. Inside, the mood was equally subdued. Protocol officers whispered like gossips in a cathedral, and the pilot hadn't blinked since Saturn orbit. Salari sat without moving in the guest compartment, her hands folded in her lap, her posture perfect. She wore a soft tunic of Valerian design, subtle gold threads winding through storm gray fabric, like veins of ore in ancient rock. Her long ears, the unmistakable sign of her lineage, were adorned with thin bands of polished obsidian, regal, quiet, and terrifyingly out of place. They hadn't told her where exactly on Earth she was going, only that she was a gesture of goodwill and an honored guest of the Terran Alliance. No one had explained why honored guests required armed escorts, monitoring implants, or translators that politely edited out phrases like prisoner exchange and trophy from the Valar surrender. Across from her sat a man who looked as if he had wandered onto the shuttle by accident. His uniform was technically regulation, but only if someone had interpreted diplomatic liaison as forgot to change out of the mechanic's coveralls. He was leaning back in his chair, one leg slung over the other, chewing on something that might have once been gum. Name's Chase, he said, offering her a grin so casual it almost qualified as illegal. Orion Chase, Lieutenant, technically. I guess I'm your host, guide, cultural translator. It's all very vague. Bureaucracies like that. You'll love it. It's like a space opera, but all the instruments are kazoos. Silari did not respond. Her gaze remained fixed out the viewport, where Jupiter's massive storm eye slowly rotated below them. That was a joke, Orion added helpfully. Kazoo Orchestra. I've been workshopping that one. A long pause followed, filled only by the hum of the ship. He took it as a sign to continue. So here's the deal. Earth's trying real hard to be welcoming. I mean, politely terrified, but welcoming. There'll be a parade, probably a speech. Someone will definitely mispronounce your name. Just roll with it. There was a guy last week who called the Zenthar ambassador Mr. Pancakes. We still don't know why. Still nothing. Not even a blink. Orion leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. Look, I get it. You've been through a lot, and this whole arrangement is, well, it's not great. But if you ever want to talk, or scream, or throw a data pad at someone, I'm pretty handy at catching things. This time her eyes moved. Slowly, like moons shifting in orbit, they met his. He saw not just weariness, but layers of it. Fatigue like sediment, time-pressed and heavy. Her voice when it came was low and edged like old glass. Do you often joke with prisoners? Orion blinked, then gave a lopsided smile. Only the pretty ones with diplomatic immunity. Her lips didn't move, but her eyes narrowed just enough to suggest she was evaluating whether sarcasm was a Terran ritual or a sign of mental instability. I am not here to amuse you, she said. Good, he said, stretching out. I have Zerk for that. At that cue, a small metallic creature skittered out from under his seat. It was roughly the size of a loaf of bread, had 6 legs, 2 flickering antennae, and a screen for a face. The screen currently displayed a badly drawn pirate hat and the words ARR, Diplomat Cat, ready for duty. Silari stared. It's a therapy bot, Orion explained, patting it affectionately. Long story. Was supposed to be a diplomatic etiquette droid. Instead, it developed a fixation with pirate lore. Tries to solve problems with imaginary cannons and bad accents. Zerk beeped and did a small spin. Releasing the emotional anchors, Captain. A sound escaped Sayalari before she could catch it. It might have been a breath or a snort, possibly even the ghost of a laugh. The ship banked slightly, engines shifting tone as Earth came into view. Blue, green, and covered in blinking orbitals like a disco ball made of bureaucracy. Orion stood and offered her his hand like a stage magician. Shall we descend with dignity or slide in sideways and hope no one notices? She didn't take his hand, but she did rise. Tall, composed, every inch the royal bloodline they claimed she no longer represented. I was trained to walk with dignity, she said, even when surrounded by fools. Orion winked. Perfect. You're going to fit right in. The shuttle docked with the Earth Embassy terminal in low orbit. Inside the receiving bay, dozens of dignitaries waited, practicing their smiles and trying not to spill anything on their formal robes. A red carpet extended down the ramp. A brass band began to play what might have been the Ilarian anthem, or possibly a remix of the Terran interplanetary tax anthem. Hard to say. Sailari emerged into the light with every camera pointed at her, every breath held. She walked like gravity bent around her, not in submission, but in respect. Orion followed half a step behind, grinning like an idiot and holding Zerk under one arm like a slightly confused lunchbox. Later in her new quarters, far too elegant, far too surveilled, she sat by the wide windows and watched the stars blur past. Orion arrived with cocoa and a grin. Figured we'd start small. No diplomacy tonight, just sugar. She took the mug and sniffed it cautiously. This smells like warm fungus. Technically correct. That's the best kind of correct. She sipped. It was sweet, thick, and suspiciously comforting. Her shoulders, barely perceptible beneath layers of poise, dropped a fraction. Orion leaned against the wall, sipping his own drink. So, first impressions of Earth? She tilted her head, listening to the hum of drones, the whisper of false peace outside the walls. Louder than expected, but the jokes are worse. He grinned. I'll take that as a compliment. Outside the windows, Earth spun slowly beneath them. Inside, for the first time in weeks, the silence between words began to loosen. Orion Chase had a theory. Every alien diplomat needed three things to adjust to Earth: caffeine, a working sense of irony, and someone willing to explain why Earthlings thought putting pineapple on pizza was a form of cultural expression. He was currently attempting to offer all three, not necessarily in that order. Salari sat at a sleek obsidian desk in her assigned embassy suite, surrounded by plants that were both ornamental and genetically engineered to monitor air quality. None of them had names. Orion found that offensive on principle and was in the process of naming them after old Terran rock stars. "This one's Bowie," he said, tapping a vine that recoiled like it had standards. "That spiky one over there? Definitely Freddy." "I fail to see the relevance of assigning personal identifiers to flora," Salari replied, not looking up from her datapad. "They are monitoring devices, not sentient. That's what they want you to think." Salari's eyes flicked up. "Are you suggesting the plants are conspiring against us?" "I'm not suggesting that," Orion said, pulling a chair backward and straddling it like a rebellious teenager in a school holodrama. "Anyway, I come bearing news. You've been formally invited to the Unity Ball next week." "A ball," she repeated as if the word personally offended her. "A diplomatic gala, technically," he amended. "Formal attire, political awkwardness, champagne that tastes like battery acid. Think of it as a performance. You get to pretend Earth has its act together, and we pretend you aren't a deeply intimidating alien queen who could dismantle a bureaucracy with her voice." "I was given away like an artifact," she said quietly. Orion's smirk faltered. "Yeah, I know." He fiddled with a loose thread on his sleeve. "But the people at that ball, they don't get to decide who you are. You do. Show up, show teeth, make them nervous." Zerk chose that moment to roll in from under the sofa, playing a dramatic orchestral sting. "Lady Selari prepares for battle. Fetch her armor, and maybe a spare hairpin." Selari blinked. "Was that Wagner?" Orion grinned. "He downloaded a few Terran operas. He thinks diplomacy and dueling are interchangeable." "Is he wrong?" "Uncomfortably not." The next few days unfolded with the awkward grace of a Terran ostrich attempting ballet. Silari was required to attend to several orientation sessions, during which various cultural experts attempted to explain Earth's customs through animated slideshows and holograms. One particularly bold instructor tried to summarize human history in 30 minutes. Silari left early. In the evenings, Orion brought her strange Earth foods, some spicy, some sweet, all suspiciously shaped. He introduced her to holochess, which she mastered in 2 games. He also introduced her to stand-up comedy, which she found confusing at first, then oddly cathartic, especially the part about politicians being legally obligated to smile while being insulted. One night, after a diplomatic dinner that included a seafood course with too many legs, Salari returned to her suite in silence. Orion followed, carrying 2 mugs and looking far too pleased with himself. "You were incredible," he said, setting the mugs down. "The way you cornered Senator Mallory on the Valor Economic Clause? She looked like she wanted to eject herself into space. She wanted me to sign a clause that would strip planetary rights from the frontier colonies," Salari said flatly. "She deserved worse. I'd have poured champagne in her handbag, but your version was classier." She looked at him then, not just at his face, but through it, like she was studying his strange mixture of wit, loyalty, and deeply human stubbornness. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Orion shrugged, sipping his drink. "Because you're not what they say you are. You're not some symbol or trophy. You're sharp and strange and brilliant. And because I've always had a weakness for lost causes." "That is a very human flaw," she said. "Yeah," he smiled. "We specialize in those." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Outside the window, Earth's curve shone under its artificial ring of satellites, glowing faintly like an eye refusing to close. Then, without warning, the embassy lights flickered. For 1 second, every screen blinked out. Zerk let out a startled "Yar!" and spun in a small panicked circle. "Power glitch!" Orion asked, already pulling out his wrist module. Salari was already moving to the wall interface. Number that wasn't random. Someone just tried to run a silent scan. On your quarters? On me, she said. Security stormed in a moment later, all polished armor and rigid posture. They asked questions in clipped tones, assured them it was probably a rogue diplomat AI, and left behind more guards and fewer answers. After they were gone, Orion turned to her. You sure you want to go to that ball? I must, she said, but I will not go as the gift they believe me to be. Good, he replied, because I already ordered a gown that looks like it could declare war on its own. Her expression cracked, just slightly. You are insufferable, and yet you haven't thrown me out the airlock. Yet. They stood there in the quiet for a moment longer, two people orbiting the same strange gravity, both caught in a moment that was no longer just diplomacy and not yet rebellion. Then Zerk beeped again. Prepare the battle heels. There shall be diplomatic dancing. Orion grinned. Yeah, we're doomed. The Unity Ball was held in the Skylight Rotunda of New Geneva, an immense glass and carbon dome that hovered 20 meters above the city on anti-grav pylons, as if diplomacy itself had decided to take flight. Beneath its shimmering floor, hover cars zipped like insects in orderly chaos. Inside, the elite of Earth and the far-stretching branches of its uneasy alliances gathered beneath chandeliers made of floating starlight crystals and anxiety. Salari entered like a comet, graceful, composed, and dressed in something that looked like it had been designed by an ancient warrior poet who moonlighted as a fashion anarchist. The fabric shifted color with her movements, from silver to dark plum to a strange violet shade not found on Earth's spectrum. Her ears were adorned with obsidian points that subtly broadcast an encrypted pulse, an old Valerian tradition for recording meetings, and, as she informed the security AI, a necessary cultural accessory. Orion stood nearby in a suit that almost fit, with Zerk polished to a reflective shine and functioning only sporadically in formal diplomacy mode, which mostly involved quoting 18th century naval codes and requesting brandy. They navigated through waves of ambassadors, senators, economists, and one suspiciously cheerful cybernetic bishop from the Europa Collective, who insisted on blessing everyone's shoes. The music was half symphony, half algorithm, and all awkward. Conversation flowed like a river of oil, shiny, unnatural, and flammable. Orion leaned toward Salari. If anyone offers you a drink with a fluorescent glow, say no. It's either jet fuel or from a Martian algae distillery. Possibly both. Salari nodded slightly, her gaze scanning the room. I've seen battlefields with less strategic tension. Yeah, well, at least on battlefields people don't try to assassinate you with compliments. Senator Mallory appeared suddenly, teeth like pearls and smile sharper than necessity required. Lady Salari, how radiant you look. Truly a symbol of interstellar progress. Earth is so honored to host such luminous heritage. Salari inclined her head. A pleasure, Senator. May your words be as sincere as your perfume is untraceable. Orion choked on his drink. Zerk beeped approvingly. Insult detected. Point to Lady Salari. The senator departed swiftly, possibly to reapply charm or reconsider her career. Later, after a particularly tedious speech from the Terran Agricultural Guild representative, who tried to compare food security with quantum entanglement, Orion and Salari escaped to the Rotunda's eastern alcove, a quiet garden of floating bonsai and suspended water globes. The plants were engineered to respond to emotional presence, gently blooming or contracting based on mood. These ones have better emotional intelligence than most of the attendees, Orion muttered, tapping a luminescent leaf that turned purple at his touch. Salari lowered herself onto a bench. Your political pageantry is impressive. It hides its fear in plain sight. You noticed that, huh? He sat beside her, loosening his collar. Half of them are terrified you'll lead a rebellion. The other half are terrified you'll get bored and go home. Let them wonder. Her eyes flicked upward. I have been quiet too long. He nodded, then pulled out a small sealed packet from his coat. Stole this from the diplomat's snack bar. It's a Terran delicacy. She opened it cautiously. This is spherical and orange. Cheese puff. Artificially flavored. Science fiction in food form. She took a bite. Her expression remained impassive. It tastes of betrayal. Exactly. We've all been there. Before more culinary analysis could be made, a quiet ping sounded from her wrist communicator. Salari frowned. Encrypted message. Valerian signature. Could be a friendly, Orion said, instantly alert, or a very unfriendly friendly. She interfaced with the message, projecting it just between them. The text unspooled in angular glyphs. The council lies. The throne is empty. If you still wear your name, speak. Orion stared. Well, that's dramatic. It's real, she murmured. That phrase was once reserved for internal resistance codes. The last time I heard it, I was standing in a chamber of ash. Zerk beeped again. Suggested response. Que hu dias? Salari stood, suddenly restless. If there are survivors, if there is a resistance, they may still think I have influence. Do you? Not yet, she said. They returned to the ballroom, where a light show had begun, a display of peace through lasers and interpretive dance, featuring a holographic dove that exploded into a star. Salari ignored it, her eyes fixed on the crowd. She wasn't looking at people now. She was searching for patterns, movement, alignment, tension and posture. She was a strategist again, not a guest. Orion watched her with quiet awe. You've changed, he said. I've remembered, she replied. The rest of the evening blurred, a swirl of diplomatic pleasantries and carefully calibrated handshakes. By the time they left, the stars above New Geneva had dimmed slightly, as if the city itself knew something had shifted. Back in her quarters, Salari stripped away the gown, the jewelry, the expectations. Beneath them was steel. Orion stood at the door, unsure for once of what to say. She turned to him. I am not who they want me to be. I know. I may not be who I once was. Then be something new. Zerk from the hallway added, suggested new title, Queen of Battle and Snack Foods. Salari smiled, barely. A title with potential. Outside, far above Earth's orbit, a dormant Valerian probe blinked to life. Coordinates updated, a signal received, and the stars began to listen. The door to Salari's quarters hissed open at 0214 Terran Central Time. Orion Chase stepped in, balancing 2 mugs of something that he swore was coffee, though it smelled suspiciously like battery fluid and cinnamon. Zerk hovered behind him, wearing a tiny cape. Emergency delivery, Orion announced. 1 crisis management beverage and 1 packet of something the vending unit labeled reconstituted waffle unit, Maple-ish. I figured it's either food or an encrypted threat. Salari didn't look up from the holodisplay projecting from her wrist. Her fingers danced through data at a speed that suggested she was either parsing encryption or solving a political coup with one hand. Was that the alarm again? Orion asked, setting the mugs on her desk. Yes, she said. 4th attempt this week, another breach in the embassy's comms net. Patterns suggest someone is scanning for hidden diplomatic channels, low-frequency Valerian ones. Let me guess. Terran security says it's probably a bird that flew too close to the satellite array. They said it was interstellar interference caused by Martian weather balloons. Classic move. Blame Mars. He sipped his drink and winced. Okay, that's definitely not coffee. Salari finally looked at him, her eyes sharp but tired. I need a secure line to the outer colonies, the real ones, the ones still loyal to the crown. Yeah, no problem, Orion said casually, then paused. Wait, very big problem. But let's pretend I'm good at this. I thought you had connections. I do. With smugglers, hackers, and a guy on Ganymede who claims to be married to a toaster, which is to say, perfect for this kind of work. Zerk beeped from the corner. Defining toaster. Results unclear. Salari turned back to her interface. I've identified 3 potential sympathizers on Earth. None have openly supported Valar's resistance, but their movements align with rebel patterns. I'll need to meet one tonight. Orion blinked. Tonight? You know what's happening tonight? Yes, the Terran Diplomatic Unity Awards. Exactly, a 5-hour ceremony dedicated to speeches about tax harmonization and fusion tariff negotiations. The excitement might actually kill me. You're presenting an award. I'm what? For outstanding contributions to interstellar agricultural policy. There was a pause. Orion stared into the middle distance. I'm going to sabotage something, he whispered. Something small. A cheese fountain. Maybe the light show. You'll manage. I'll wear a tie and everything. Like a real adult. Hours later, Orion stood at the podium in the main hall, adjusting his formal wear and trying not to sweat under the combined heat of stage lights and universal diplomatic disinterest. The audience looked bored in 14 different languages. And now, he said, for the award you've all been waiting for, dreading, tolerating in silence, the recognition of outstanding contributions to interstellar agricultural policy, a smattering of claps, one yawn. Meanwhile, in the sub-levels beneath the embassy, Celari moved silently, a holographic scrambler flickering over her form. The old corridors were part of the original embassy design, back when Earth still thought marble columns impressed aliens. Most diplomats didn't even know they existed, but Celari had studied the architectural schematics Orion smuggled her, and she'd memorized pressure points like a tactician reading terrain. She met the contact in a maintenance alcove behind an obsolete power conduit. He was Terran, older, and carried the air of someone who'd been betrayed by every government he'd ever voted for. You're her, he said almost reverently. The one they gave away. I was not given, she said. I was delivered. There's a difference. He smiled. My colony, Delpher 7, we kept the old codes. Still play the royal broadcast once a cycle, even though most think it's theater. They're wrong, she said. It was always real. He handed her a chip. Encrypted coordinates. 3 safe houses. One's already active. People are waiting for you. She nodded. I will reach them. As she turned to go, he hesitated. Do you have a plan? She glanced back. I'm working on one. Orion was halfway through his speech, reading off a scroll that had been printed in Comic Sans as a prank by Zerk. He could tell because Zerk kept whispering, I am artist. And so, we acknowledge the heroic cross-pollination efforts of the Agricultural Bureau, Orion said, without which the lunar carrot crisis might have claimed more salad bars than we care to imagine. Polite laughter, barely. Then the lights dimmed. A flicker, a moment of hush. The display screen behind him, meant to show a rotating farm satellite, sputtered. For one brief second, a different image appeared. A symbol, old, Valerian, a mark once worn by generals, queens, and philosophers. It pulsed once, then vanished. Celari reappeared in her quarters 3 minutes later, her steps silent, the door sealing behind her. Orion arrived 20 minutes after that, still holding his scroll. You hijacked the display, he said. I reminded them, she replied. He dropped onto the couch. You're lucky Zerk distracted everyone by setting off the emergency lights. He pretended to be a meteor drill. Zerk floated in, emitting triumphant music. And thus, I saved the Diplomatic Farm Awards. Celari poured 2 glasses of dark steaming tea. Not cocoa this time. Something richer, older. Valerian brew. She handed one to Orion. To rebellion, he lifted his glass. To confusing the hell out of everyone first. They clinked their glasses lightly, the quiet hum of distant stars rising behind them. Far out past Earth's orbital grid, a Valerian frigate changed course. Silent, dark, but no longer lost. It turned toward the signal. The Queen was waking. Orion was trying to solder a quantum relay node with a toothbrush and what looked suspiciously like a melted spoon. Look, if you squint and completely disregard safety standards, this might work, he muttered, sparks leaping in all directions. Celari raised one brow without looking up from the central console. This is your plan for accessing a secure Terran broadcast satellite? Plan is a strong word. Improvised heroic moment fueled by panic and caffeine is more accurate. Zerk floated overhead, holding a tangle of wires like a nervous bouquet. Probability of success, 12%. Probability of impressing. Lady Salary, infinite. Thank you for your confidence, Celari said dryly. The hideout they were in wasn't technically a hideout. It was the maintenance level of a decommissioned orbital bakery satellite, once famous for producing edible mooncakes. Now it buzzed with encrypted transmissions, Valerian resistance scouts, and the unmistakable scent of recycled cinnamon. Aboard were a dozen dissidents, humans, aliens, and one sentient fungal growth that communicated solely through humidity patterns. They were building something together, information, connection, a message loud enough to cut through the noise of politics and silence. Salari keyed the transmitter. "We have 67 seconds before they locate this signal," she said. "Are you ready?" Orion handed her the microphone. "I was born ready." "Well, I was born screaming and covered in goo, but you get the idea." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. She pressed the broadcast key. Across planets, moons, orbital rings, and deep space communes, the symbol pulsed again. And then came her voice. "I was traded, framed in treaties, wrapped in silence, but not broken." The feed carried her words on every hacked frequency they could access, scrambled through rogue satellites, coded into entertainment streams, even buried in ads for beard supplements. "I am Silari of Valar. I speak now not as a queen without a throne, but as a woman who was never meant to forget." On Earth, ambassadors froze. In orbit, Terran security scrambled signals. On Valar, somewhere deep beneath the capital ruins, old speakers crackled back to life. "We were told we lost, but survival is not loss. Silence is not surrender." Orion leaned toward Zerk and whispered, "She's good, right?" "She is summoning an army and a vibe." Salari finished the transmission with one final phrase, spoken in the ancient tongue. The symbol flared one last time and faded. The satellite immediately exploded. Not violently, just with the sort of polite fizzle that said, "Your warranty has expired." Later, aboard a reclaimed frigate named Midnight Crown, they regrouped. Valerian survivors arrived in waves. Pilots, scholars, old soldiers in mismatched armor. Even a royal AI core, long thought erased, reactivated from a smuggled data chip hidden in a flute. The resistance was real now, not in whispers, not in shadows. Salari stood before them in the ship's main hall. Her bearing was no longer tentative. She moved with purpose, voice calm but firm. "I do not demand loyalty," she said. "I ask for honesty. For those who will build, not just fight. We will not mirror those who made us exiles. We are something new." Someone clapped. Then others joined. Even Zerk clanged a serving tray against the wall. Orion leaned against a console watching her. She was different now. Not a relic of a fallen monarchy, but something sharper, wiser, and annoyingly more organized. He was pretty sure she now outranked everyone on the ship, including the coffee machine. Later in the observation deck, she joined him. "You're quiet," she said. "I've been thinking," he replied. "That explains the smoke." He laughed. "I never thought I'd end up helping restart a royal revolution with a woman who once threatened to remove my spleen for suggesting karaoke night." "You were off-key." "I was enthusiastic." They stood in silence a moment. Then she said, "You stayed." Even when it would have been safer to walk away. "Yeah, I do that sometimes. It's a terrible habit. You've helped me become more than what they made me." He looked at her. "You did that yourself. I just kept showing up with snacks and bad jokes." She reached out and took his hand. It mattered. Behind them the stars moved, some with purpose now, answering signals long dormant. The war wasn't over. There would be resistance, backlash, rumors and fears and factions, trying to twist it all again. But for now, in that moment, Salari stood with her people again, not alone. A queen, yes, but also something rarer. Hope. And beside her, the human who had never bowed, never bargained, just believed.